All right. Hello, my dear friend, Michelle Leduc
Hello.
Catlin.
Hello,
How
my
you
lovely
doing?
Sonia.
How are you doing?
Well, as we briefly discussed beforehand, how you're doing these days is a pretty big question.
It's a big question.
But
Yes.
in this moment, being with you, I'm great.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm happy to have you here. I'm so grateful that you were able to make time to do this. I know you're a very, very busy girl. You write a blog, you do a podcast, you do so many things. You're so multifaceted. I'm always in awe with how much you know and how much you do and how gifted you are. I mean, you're an incredible cook. You know so much about health. I mean, from A to Z, you should really be a doctor. And you also just are so engaged with like what's going on currently with our, current situation with COVID and politically speaking and everything. And so tell me a little bit about so you're a writer, right? And you write beautifully, by the way. I love reading your blogs.
Thank
They're
you.
always beautifully written and so informative. I mean, the information is so fantastic. So
Good.
tell me a little bit about this blog because you said to me earlier it's a health rights blog.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to know what is that? What does
What
that
does that mean?
what does that
Yeah.
mean?
So first of all, thank you for everything you said, because as you're talking, how I tend to view myself is unfocused, you know?
Oh
So
no.
yeah, so
I
I
love that.
to hear multifaceted is such a much better interpretation, right?
Yes.
So health rights.
Yes.
I have been dealing with various levels of chronic fatigue for about a dozen years, as you know,
Yes.
but there's context that I need to set for this blog.
Yes.
So I had to, because there's not one source of it and it's not that easy to define, I have had to research for myself for about the last 7, 8 years, right? Just dig in, see all kinds of practitioners, and really find solutions for myself. And I'm happy to say that while I am not 100%, I am. I'm pretty good, right? Like I'm managing to do things that I hadn't been able to do. So I hadn't been able to work for several years. Um, what
And I'm
happened
sure,
was,
I just want to say, I'm sure a lot
yeah,
of people that have immune illnesses can relate to
mhm.
what you're saying here because it is so difficult to find in Western medicine someone who can really help you with that stuff.
It's very difficult because what Western medicine does well is trauma. So if
Right.
you have trauma to the body, right,
To the body.
there's yeah, there's nothing. Yes, there's nothing better, right? If you
Yes.
have like anything from, if you have a heart attack, if you have a congenital disorder, right? If you have anything that's life threatening immediately, right?
Yes.
Amazing, right? However, their job is not to look at the root cause.
Yes.
So when you're talking about immune issues or any other fatigue related issues, you have to get to root cause. There is no pill you can take to get rid of your fatigue, right? So
Right.
I developed a number of favorite resources, right? So I would go to these websites and I would get information and I would start to and work with practitioners and started to heal myself. A couple of years ago, I noticed something really odd happening. And that was that the search engine was no longer bringing up my favorite health resources. And
Mm.
I thought that was really odd. And I began to read that many of these resources were being, how can I say this? The algorithms were changing such that these alternative, let's call them health resources, were no longer coming up. And one of the websites I used had a 90% drop in usership. Like, yeah, massive. So I was disturbed, right? It's like, well, why is this happening? Why is this health information being censored, basically?
Right.
But, it bothered me, but I wasn't prepared to do anything about it, right? It was just like, oh, okay, I better mark my favorite websites and, let people know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
As when all of the pandemic stuff started,
Yeah.
I was on board with everything I was being told, in the mainstream media, except that my favorite health resources were telling me something else. And I thought, like, have they all of a sudden gone crazy? And I actually thought that because I so trusted the information I was being given that I just thought, okay, they've lost their minds. I don't know why. I've trusted them all these years. They've helped me, but they've lost their minds. And then I started to see that that resources that I absolutely knew to be scientifically based had opposing information. And so I began to dig in. And the more I dug in, the more I felt like I have to share this information so that people can at least get a balanced view, so that people can get like information right from the data, right from the scientists, rather than filtered through media or politicians. Yeah. So I started to share with friends, and then I felt like I was so overcome with this that I had to shift my writing, at least for a few months, in that direction. So for me, the tagline of Gather Your Wits is scientific evidence, spiritual principles, health, freedom.
I love it.
So that's really the coming together of everything, as, you know, and it's not something I ever wanted to do. It's something I feel compelled to do. You know, I have some writing skills. I can use that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So we talked a little bit before we started the recording, we talked a little bit about anger and how that is connected to your health issues, right?
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about that, because I think anger is something that is very difficult for a lot of people, and especially women. And I think right now there is a lot of anger in the world, you know, people being scared and being angry. And I think it is an important subject to talk about. So I was just curious, like, how does it relate to your own personal life, to your own physical stuff? And yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's very difficult, especially for women, and especially in our very positivity driven culture. Yeah, for sure. So we tend to think that there are good emotions and bad emotions, right? Rather than emotions, right? That clearly we've been given this broad range of emotions for a reason, right? So they all serve a purpose. It's what we do with them. Yeah. And over the last several months, I have been particularly like grappling with this for myself, which is why, for me, I balance whatever I say or write with spiritual principles, because I know that what we focus on expands. So you cannot create peace by going to war. You know, you can't create justice by being unjust. You know, you can't use the opposite to create something, right? Even though what everybody wants, I think fundamentally we all want to experience love, peace, joy, freedom in our lives, right? Fundamentally. For me, when I started the blog and I started really digging into the research and digging into a lot of what's happening, and then the discrediting of really well-respected scientists, it was horrifying and of course angering. And I was working with a practitioner, and he said to me, because I recognized also that when I first got sick, of course there was anger, there was upset, there were all these things. And at some point I came to terms with it. Yeah. And once I accepted, okay, so this is how it is right now, there was so much peace, and I actually could even use it to grow, you know, to learn to slow down, to appreciate things. And I don't work half as hard as I used to, you know, I really don't work that much. I just really focus my attention on what I'm doing. But back to what he said. So he said, you have a lot of energy right now. And it's funny because I noticed that I had all this anger, and yet at the same time, I had all this new energy. It's like, well, I've been wanting energy for a long time, right? And what he said to me, and I keep repeating this to anyone who will listen, is that anger directed inward is unhealthy, right? We know that. You can't, and that's the problem when we attempt to just whitewash it is that we're usually swallowing it, right? And that is, we're suppressing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's unhealthy. Anger turned outward can be dangerous, right? That's not a productive use of anger. But anger used as rocket fuel can take us to the next level. So what I see by that is that
to be accepting of our own anger and use it as an energy pull rather
productively,
rather than against somebody else.
Yes. So where I have stood in this whole period and you know, for most of my adult life is to be for something. So not to put your energy against something, right? Like I'm anti this or I'm anti that, right? So I am for freedom and for community and for love and compassion and kindness. You know, I'm for those things.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that I don't see, read, or hear things that cause like that not to be present, right?
Around that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, no, sometimes things are very upsetting.
Yes.
So I just notice them, allow them, and then I look for ways to productively stand for the things I stand for.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a really great way to deal with anger is to notice it, to acknowledge it, and to let the energy take you, not against something, but for something.
Yes. I like and honestly, I know that's not easy. And I don't succeed at it all the time, for sure.
The truth is, you know, we are not taught to use our anger in a productive way. We're either taught to suppress it or we're taught to explode with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we see in society as well, right? From other people. And so you don't very often see healthy examples of how people use their anger in a productive, good way, right?
Yeah. That's so true.
I've heard stories from people that have used anger in a productive way. And it's been always very inspiring for me to hear these stories, you know, because I'm like, wow, that's so cool. And, you know, like you're a Libra, right? And I'm a Libra rising sign. And for people like Libras, it's not very easy to be with anger because Libra is that sign that wants harmony. It wants equality. It wants justice. It wants to bring people together. It wants collaboration, right? So that's an energy where we feel like that should not be about anger, right? But the truth is the opposite sign of Libra is Aries. And Aries is all about anger and passion and assertion and all that stuff. So what do we say about opposites, right? Opposites need each other. They need each other to complete each other and to be able to create a balance, right? So Aries needs Libra, Libra needs Aries, right? So Libra needs anger. It needs to be able to access that anger so that it can create that justice, so it can collaborate, right? So that it can create harmony in our environment, right? And I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying that because, you know, it just rings so true to me, you know?
There's a couple of things that ring true. First of all, my husband is an Aries. So, and I see it. I see that the places where we're opposite and where it really works for us, right? It just really inspires the other, right?
Yes.
The other thing is that there were two things that occurred to me. One is that many years ago, there was a famous Canadian columnist and activist, and I interviewed her many years ago, and I asked her what drove her, right? And I have to tell you, she was like the most cheerful, joyous, like she was just a natural leader, right? Yeah. And when I asked her what drove her, she smiled and she said, rage.
I love it. I love how authentic she was about that and how honest.
Yeah, but it's so funny because at the time I didn't have the wisdom to really get it. I just thought, that can't be right. You know, like I couldn't process that, didn't fit into my understanding of life, but I so get it now. It really stuck with me. I so get it. The other thing is, as you said, what's needed to create harmony. You know, my husband and I are big followers of Eckhart Tolle, right?
Right.
And I've just found him to be so accessible on so many levels. But he talks about how, we're here not to be happy, we're here to evolve, and that challenges are a natural part of life, right? So, and when you think about it, like if you think about two things, one is that when we accept the challenges life offers us, we find peace with whatever it is we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing is, if we look at every great thing we've ever accomplished in our lives, there were challenges, and the bigger, the more rewarding that thing, right?
Oh, whether it's a moment not pleasant maybe, but when you look back, you go, wow, that was exactly what needed to happen so that I can have that breakthrough and go to that next level. Absolutely.
I mean, take it down to as basic a thing as giving birth, right? You have this incredible, a challenge and this incredible reward. Relationships, right? Relationships are work, but the more you work at a relationship, the more rewarding it is.
Yes.
Absolutely. Right? A career, you going to school, studying for something, right? It's hard. These things are hard, but they're so rewarding. So all those things, they have our greatest rewards. So right now we are in the midst of this incredible global challenge. Yes. And when I step back and take that view, right, that, okay, there's this bigger picture, right? It's this massive challenge right now. And if I look at it that way, then I can see that there's an opportunity. There's an enormous opportunity for us to evolve, as human beings.
Mm-hmm. And so. I think I also take the view that, in times like this where there seems to be so much, chaos and misinformation and, bullying to some degree, right? Mm-hmm. I take the view that, yes, this is something that we see, but in my point of view, whatever is the lighter and higher energy is always something that will sustain itself longer than the energy that's dense and comes from fear and comes from a place of, smallness, right? Mm-hmm. That energy cannot sustain itself. It might sustain itself for a little while, but I always believe that something that's open-hearted and that's light and that's authentic, right? And it doesn't mean it has to be only light, right? But it has to be authentic in the way that it's like grounded in love and in reality and in an authentic place within yourself, I think these things are way more sustainable, than...
That's a really great point. I hadn't even considered that, but that's a really great point. You're right, because even for me, doing the research I've had to do, I've had to be around a lot of that dark, dense energy. It's exhausting.
It is.
It's exhausting, even if you're not participating in it, right?
Yes.
It's so true. And really, I mean, all that light energy is you're right. It's sustainable because it is the absence of fear, right? Yeah. And so there's nothing to generate. It's actually just the absence of that dark energy. And it's just something to let go of, right?
Yeah. It just is. Light energy just is. It's always accessible to you. It's always there.
Yeah.
You have to actually not work very hard at it. You just have to release and let go of all the crap that's on top of it.
Yeah, which isn't easy, but at least even just knowing that that's possible.
Yes.
Is useful, right? Just that reminder. It's like, oh
yeah.
There's that joy, that love, that energy is there, right? I might not even if we can say in the moment, I can't access it right now. I don't have access.
Being authentic and acknowledging that, right? I think being authentic is really key. Like being authentic with yourself, hugely. Where you're at, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. Just acknowledging that and not trying to fix yourself, not trying to put another sugar layer on top of the shit cake, just let yourself acknowledge that there is a shit cake right now, don't be like you have to be, you have to be light all the time. You have to be this all the time. You have to be perfect all the time. No, you don't. You have to be authentic, right? You got to
Yes.
stand in your own authenticity and say, you know what, today I'm not feeling it. Today I'm scared. Or today I'm so angry, I don't want to talk to anybody. Just being authentic with yourself,
Mhm.
and then also saying, you know what, it's okay. Like just pampering yourself, like just giving yourself a hug and saying, like, it's okay that I'm feeling that way. I think we're so not
Yeah,
conditioned to deal with our feelings in an accepting way, in a way where we can just say,
completely.
all right, it's okay. Hey, you're human. You have these feelings because they're just there, and it's okay.
Well, and the irony is because we've tried to whitewash our feelings, right? Because we've tried to, well, no, I'm not going to look at that. That's too upsetting, or, I can't be angry. I have to be positive about it. I have to focus on the positive. But
Yeah.
that actually gives life to that negativity because it's just festering,
Yeah.
Whereas if we can say
And you're
exactly what you
denying
said,
something in that moment, right?
that's
As
it.
you, as you say,
And
I'm only going to focus on the positive. You're going to deny all
yeah,
the stuff that's still there. It's still
yeah,
going to be there.
for sure. And if you think about it, it's like, well, nature didn't make a mistake, or God, if that's your
Believe, yeah.
perception, belief,
Yeah.
you know, that's not a mistake that we have all these emotions, right? There's a
Yeah.
purpose for them.
No.
So to say, no, these ones are good and these ones are bad. No, our behaviors, what we do with them, that's a different conversation, right? But you're absolutely right. We can't be denying them. And right now there's a lot of emotion. And
There's
we
a
need
lot
to
of
find a way to say that. And I do that all the time. If I am just off, I do not speak to
And I
people.
think I think what we tend to do as human beings is when there is a lot of emotion that we're uncomfortable with,
Mm.
right? And of course, when there is a time of lots of changing and a lot of uncertainty, we do get uncomfortable quite a bit, right? And when
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of feelings of discomfort, I find that people tend to want to shift out of it as quickly as possible. People don't
Yes.
want to be with their own discomfort. They don't want to embrace and accept
Mm-hmm.
their own discomfort. So they want to shift out of it as quickly as possible. And in shifting out of it, what do? We go to our mind and we go, okay, what is wrong here? Why I'm feeling so uncomfortable? And then we try to fight whatever the discomfort is with our mind, with our head, right? So we go,
Yes.
it's this person's fault, or they're doing it wrong, or I need to manage this, I need to control this, or I need to do this, right?
It's
But
a really good point you're bringing up, though, that by denying our emotions, our mind, our identity, our ego is then focusing it outwards and laying blame. That's really good. So that's like another reason to
yeah,
be with it. And I think the other thing is we think that it will, because as you said, we want to push it out. We think that's going to do it, but in fact, we're giving it life.
it
Because
makes
if we
it work.
just sat with it and allowed ourselves to experience it, it
Yeah,
would actually dissipate, right? You have to
absolutely.
look it in the eye,
Because
you know?
because feelings are just energy, and energy as it becomes embraced and accepted, it will just dissipate. It will just flow out. It
Yeah.
will move through. I like to call it like a moving through, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it comes, it almost, I mean, feelings, it feels like it's a part of sensations in your body, right? They usually
Yes,
come
yes,
from below and then they rise up, right?
right.
That's kind of how I feel it very often. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on what kind of feeling is, it can be in different parts of the body, but I feel like feelings are like that. If you can start to really embrace the sensations that you're experiencing in the body, and the feelings that are, you can name them and give them your acceptance and your love, what happens is that these energies all of a sudden start to go, and they
You
just,
know, I like the word sensations. I like that word because when you think of them as sensations, you don't then add your
judge as
identity.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Whereas feelings, well, they're my feelings. They're part of who I
They're so
am, my
precious.
feelings. Yeah, exactly. But no, your feelings are mostly an expression of, or a result of your mind's machinations, which is just your identity, right? So it's not, but sensations, it's just like, oh,
We're moving through.
Yeah, it's very
And
good.
let them move, you know, let
Yeah,
them go. So,
yeah.
and yeah, and it's not, it's easier said than done, obviously, because
Uh,
otherwise everybody would
yeah,
be able to do it, right? And
yeah.
it is something that, because we're not trained in this, because we're not conditioned into using our feelings and our sensations in that way, it takes it takes time to learn, to practice, and to get comfortable with doing that, you know,
Mm.
and to also keep reminding ourselves, like, I can do this, you know, like it's in my power to
And
embrace and
yeah,
to accept these sensations. That's in my power. That nobody else needs to do that for me, you know.
and
That
nobody can.
we
Yeah,
we can do it.
yeah. It's great because I think, one of the ways we get tripped up is we think once we know that, right? So let's say, excuse me, once we determine, oh, okay, so it's my responsibility, I can do that, then we make ourselves wrong if we don't. But it's a lifelong practice.
It's a definitely, it's a practice. It's a
Mhm.
long practice.
Excuse
Because
me.
I've been doing this type of work, pretty much since the early 2000s, right?
Mhm.
And to some degree, I've been in therapy since the 90s, right? But the therapy is a little bit different from really actually practicing,
Mhm.
what you're doing with your own feeling body, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's been more since the early 2000s. And it's been a very graduate, very slow progress, very,
Mhm.
very slow.
Yeah.
And not because I didn't practice this enough or not because I didn't want it enough, but because our conditioning is so strong,
And
it takes
that's where we
so
have to bring some forgiveness to ourselves,
much.
right? Because
Yes,
it's our conditioning, it's also inherited, right? We have inherited pain, and we now know, even scientifically, that pain is inherited for at least 13
absolutely.
generations.
And I just read in an astrology journal actually about trauma, and this woman was saying, trauma is something that doesn't just happen to veterans or to people who have tremendous physical trauma or tremendous emotional trauma. Trauma happens in small ways and in big ways, and every single person on this planet has trauma. Trauma is something that just is part of life. And we have to acknowledge our own traumas, because trauma is when the body gets overwhelmed with dealing with something. And
Mm,
that can
mhm,
happen to anybody. This can happen, and children, of course, right? Children
mhm,
can experience trauma very quickly because
mhm.
they're not set up to deal with certain life situations
Mhm.
the way an adult can. They're just not
Right.
capable. So children, of course, experience trauma all the time. And adults do too. But, if we think about, everybody has been once a child,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm,
everybody has once been a child that's been overwhelmed and not
mhm,
been able to deal with a certain situation.
mhm.
It could have been something small, it could have been something big, right? This means that every single adult out there, to some level and to some degree, is traumatized in some way.
Mhm,
It's part of being a human being. It's part of life, right?
mhm,
And so, but we try to deny that we're traumatized. We try to
mhm.
deny that there's trauma in us, and we try to be perfect and jump over it rather than
Yeah.
move through it. We try to jump
Yes.
over it, right?
Mhm.
And just
Yeah.
not be with it. And
Well,
that
again, it ties back
doesn't
to that.
work.
Sorry. Mhm.
It
It
doesn't
ties
work.
back to that whole thing that life is here to challenge us. And
Right.
if we don't face that challenge, we don't look it in the eye, then we're actually not fulfilling on its purpose, which is for us to grow and evolve.
Yes. And that's something I love to say all the time too, is like, remember, we are in a time of great evolution. We are in a time where things are shifting tremendously, and that's scary and it's uncomfortable. But ultimately, if we look at the bigger picture, it's exactly why we're here. It's exactly what we all came for. All of our souls that are here on this planet right now, we were like, yay, let's do this. Let's be here for this huge event of like huge shift and breakthrough. Like, I want to be here for this. I want to see it live. I want to get front tickets to the front row, right? Like, that's what I'm thinking, you know? I'm like, yeah, you know, I mean, I want to be right there when it happens, you know? And I want to be a part of it. You know, I want to do my part to help that shift, to help that happen, right?
Yeah.
So if we talk about like, how can we all be a part of it, right? Like, what would you say? I mean, I know so actually let's talk about your podcast, right? Because I think that's a really great beginning of like, how can you do your part, right? Because I think that, you know, your blog obviously is one of the parts that you're doing to contribute to helping people to get the facts, to see another point of view, to see, have a more holistic and a more wholehearted kind of understanding of what things are right now. But tell me about the podcast a little bit. What's the name, first of all?
Right. So it's called the How to Be Free podcast.
Love it.
And it was the brainchild of one of my favorite people, your husband.
That's right.
And I mean, as soon as I heard it, it was like, I want to be a part of that, right? And the idea is that every week we interview someone in any area of life. So far, we have taken on mindset, like having a vacation mindset. We've taken on real estate. We're going to be doing legal issues, health, holistic health. And the idea is, if you look at any area of your life, what steps can you take to experience just 5% more freedom in 1 week from now?
Great. So very practical.
Very practical. And what I love about this is that there are a lot of people who, you know, say, change your life. I can show you how to change your life, and, you know, you'll transform and you'll be rich and you'll be famous and you'll be thin or whatever, you know. And these things usually don't work. And they don't work because they're not sustainable. And they also don't work because something works for one type of person, and you would know this, right? So there are many different types of people. And so if something works for one type of person, that doesn't mean it's going to work for all types of people. And the problem with that becomes that those of us who think, oh, I could be one of those people, but we're not, it causes us to then fail at producing that result, which then has a negative effect on our thinking,
our dialogue, and how we feel ourselves.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is that either we keep pursuing these very grandiose plans and ideas, and keep disappointing ourselves, or we work really, really hard to make some progress, but we can't maintain it. It's the whole thing about weight loss, right? Most people, they never maintain it. Doesn't matter how good the program is. Doesn't matter how good the speaker is. Doesn't matter how motivating they are. That's all great. But if we can take an action that's actually doable,
right? That
we could say, okay, 5%, right? If I could do this one thing in a week and I could experience, you know, I'm feeling a little better about that. Well, then maybe we'll take another. That's it. We'll do another 5%.
It's funny to say 5% because that's always what I use in my blog and in my videos. I always say coaching questions. Can you do this 5%? You know, more, or can you look at it from like, what if I engaged in this 5% more, right? So
that's so great.
I think it comes down to baby steps, right? Because what it is, that 5% doesn't mean that you're not doing it all the way. It just means you're taking baby steps. And I think
you're building a muscle. You don't start by running a marathon, right? Yeah, exactly. You could kill yourself by running. And I'll tell you, my husband said this to me. I have a habit. I'm all in, right? So it's like when I started this blog, I mean, I'm dreaming about.
That's the Scorpio in you. The Scorpio in you is like, I'm going to go 100%, 1,000%. Let's do it. You know.
And so I burned myself out.
Yeah.
You know, whereas back before I started the blog, I'd started to work on a novel, and I was working on it for like 20 minutes a day. And it was so fun. And I was starting to build something. If you do that while it's still fun, you can have more fun, right? It's like, again, back to exercise. You know, you don't want to run the marathon. Walk around the block. Hey, that felt good. I'll walk twice around the block next
And I
time. I'll
think
walk
it's
for 20
important
minutes.
in our society that we don't operate from our shoulds, right?
Yeah.
That we don't operate from our shoulds, but that we operate from our open heart, where it's like, yeah, this is great. I'm so in, right?
It's
Rather than
really
I
great.
should be doing that, right?
Well, I used to joke that I can turn anything into a chore,
That's funny.
It doesn't matter how joyful or fun it is. I can make it a chore, right? So this is, I think, many things that we create for our own needs. I mean, I started my blog for my own needs, right? For my own peace of mind, my own need for information, and my own need to balance it with spiritual principles, right? So this podcast, really excited. We're going to be launching it in September. And so
when is there a date yet, or just September?
I'm going to say September 1st.
Okay.
I'm going to say September 1st. Okay. Yeah, we're going to launch it. So
I'll have a link below this video with your website, GatherYourWits.com, right? Mm-hmm. And it will be posted on your website.
It will.
Maybe other social media as well.
Yes. Until I have a link. We don't have a link anywhere else. So yeah, that's the best place to start with. And then from there, once it's posted, we'll have all the other places.
Access from GatherYourWits.com as well, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. And people can become members on your website?
They can subscribe. It's a free subscription.
To the blog. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's donations only right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to just get the information out. I do work at it full time, so I am not being paid. So any donations are always appreciated.
Always welcome. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Yes, thanks for that. And then you also mentioned to me you have a YouTube channel. Is that something that we're going to be sharing as well?
You know what? I'm going to say yes. When I saw that you had, your YouTube channel, I thought I should go look at mine. Because I hadn't looked at it I think the last entry was about 2 years ago, this fall. Okay. And I thought, I think these might be more relevant, and all they are on my YouTube channel, they're about 3 to 4 minute videos asking questions about different subjects, about listening, about acceptance, about compassion, I think.
But short videos that are
just short videos
helping people to engage with their own process.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful.
They're just kind of spiritual inquiries, let's call them.
Love it.
Yeah, little words of wisdom. And they all have questions in them, right? So I may be talking
to what I do too with my videos. So that's beautiful. Perfect. Okay, great. So we'll definitely add that YouTube channel at the bottom as well.
Okay.
Now let me just see how much time we still have. A couple of minutes together. So is there anything else that you'd like to share in terms of because I want to invite people to kind of connect to themselves in a more holistic way, right? And when I say holistic, I mean, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, right? So that there is a connectivity between, because as a human being, we're all those things, right? We are a spirit being in a human body. We have a mental body, we have an emotional body, and we have a physical body, right? So we are all of those things. And how can that help us to approach life more from a holistic place rather than, just from a mental place or just from an emotional place or just focus on our physical well-being and nothing else, right? So I think that in society right now, there's a tendency to kind of to compartmentalize and to only focus on either the physical body or only the mental body or only the emotional body, but to not bring them together. And in my experience, going through everything I've been going through, it is so important to recognize that it's all completely interconnected, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was just wanting to get your point of view on that and hear what you have to say about that, since you've been through a lot of health stuff and, spiritual crises and all sorts of things, right? So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know it's a big question.
Yeah. I'm not even sure what the question is.
So the question is how can we connect on a more holistic level?
Right. Yeah. It's such
compartmentalize and stay separate from all of our different parts.
It's such a great question. The first thing I would say, the first thing that comes to me is engage in the question. right, is just keep engaging in that question.
Keep
How
asking
do I
yourself that
ask
question.
yourself that question? Yeah. How do I do that?
How
Yeah.
do I do that?
I
Very,
think
very good point. Love
that the most, how can I say this? I don't want to say the most important quality, but I think ultimately we need to find what's authentic for us.
Yeah.
I think that authenticity, being true to ourselves, Shakespeare said it, right? This above all else, right? I think being true to ourselves is the most important thing we can do, right? Because it gives us access to our unique expression in the world, right? It gives us access,
power, to our energy,
everything.
Access to.
And I think the hardest challenge is for us to find that authenticity in a world that really pulls for us to fit in. So we end up in a job, in a home, in a relationship that is about what we think we want. And what we think we want is usually an inherited idea handed down by people we've never met. And so
it's very true.
How do we connect that? We have to take time in whatever form to listen to the still small voice, right? Whether it's meditating, walking in nature, journaling. I taught journaling workshops for a long time. Yes, that's what I do, because, and I think my writing comes from that place, is that I'm always asking, but what is it I really want to say? What is it that wants to be expressed? So
I love that. What it is that wants to be expressed, because then it's not really even about you. It's just what needs to come through, right?
Yeah.
What needs to be
said. And ironically, it wasn't until I got sick that I found my own voice, because I had worked for years in television, right? So writing, directing, and lifestyle television, always having to write in somebody else's voice, right? The voice of the host of whatever show I was working on. And so while I had certain skills, I didn't even know what my own voice was. And so journaling helped me, because journaling, you're not
yourself.
You're not censoring yourself, right? And sometimes you do, but then you can notice. See, that's why I think it's such a great presence practice.
You are censoring yourself.
That's it, right? Because sometimes I'm writing, it's like, what am I writing this for posterity? I think somebody's going to just, it's like the Diary of Anne Frank or something, right? I'll notice my own signiugance about my writing. It's like, okay.
Right.
Like
you let it go again, and you go, oh, let me just write whatever comes out.
Yeah. So there's always this kind of,
I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes. And that's what it should be, right? It should be just everything, like spew, whatever, right? Don't write this is not the edited version. It's not being published, right? It's a practice.
Version.
Yeah. And in fact, for me, it is a presence practice. So whatever that works for you to be present. And what I mean by that is that you can be in this moment without judgment. So accepting this moment without judgment. You can recognize there are things about this moment that you might not like, but if you're actually present in this moment, there is nothing to resist, there is nothing to fight, and there's nothing to figure out. So whatever you can do to access that, and those are the ways I know: walking in nature, without a podcast in your ears, without music, without anything else, meditating if that works for you, journaling without judgment, whatever it is, even
quiet and peace, right?
And even it could be as simple as this. If you say, well, I don't have time for any of those things, right? When you are chopping the carrots for dinner, chop the carrots.
Yeah, don't think of like a million.
Don't think.
Just
chop.
Stay in the moment with your carrots.
That's it. So whatever you're doing,
Be
sometimes
mindful.
that is the best practice.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it, and I struggle with this myself,
Yeah.
but the other part of it is to trust in life.
Yes.
Because honestly,
Big one.
we tend to think, well, why should I trust in life? What evidence do I have for trusting in life? But what evidence do you have for mistrusting life? Like
Right.
trust as just a declaration,
Yeah.
trust as an act of faith.
Yeah.
Just trust, because honestly, I have spent so much of my life resisting what's happening and, mistrusting what's happening. And all that does is drain your energy.
Yeah.
It
And
hasn't.
it
And
comes back down to what I was saying earlier, that, the dark stuff and the things that we focus on sometimes that are not, don't make us happy, right? Those are the things that don't sustain themselves. But the things
yeah.
that are light and bigger than that,
Mhm.
those are the things that will sustain themselves. So we can trust that, right? So even if you can't trust
Yes.
whatever is right in front of you, just trust that light energy and that stuff that's always there underneath everything, that will always sustain itself because it doesn't need anything else.
That's very good. That's very good.
Because we
The
can
other,
just trust in that, right?
yeah, you're right. You're right. We can try that energy is always there, and it always will be there.
Yeah.
Um, the other part of that is I think that when we don't trust in life, we don't trust in ourselves, right? Because we don't trust that if something's
That's
coming our way,
right? It's all,
yeah,
everything is a reflection, right? So
we don't trust ourselves. So if we trust in life, then we can trust that whatever life presents us, we'll handle.
I can do it. Yeah.
I can do it. And the paradox or the irony is that when we don't trust, because we think, no, I have to be prepared, I have to, I have to defend or protect myself, right? I have to be on guard.
Yeah.
Then we actually only have access to our identity. So we only have access to the mind that is already set, right? Yeah. We don't have access to all of consciousness. Yeah. So when we trust and we trust ourselves, then we can move, then we can be in that, we can move beyond. We can actually, we're open. Yeah. And so we can allow for answers to come to us, because anybody who's ever done anything creative knows that you don't create from what you know. Right. Right. Creativity comes through you. Right. Okay. It's like,
you need to stay open.
Yeah.
You need to allow something
yeah.
to come through too. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And whether that's creating, a piece of art or creating a business, there's really, when you open yourself up and allow, then you're allowing consciousness to move through you, right? You're just like a vessel. Yeah. So trusting in life is the other really, really key part. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for everything that you've said so far. I loved our chat. I loved us connecting. This was so beautiful, and I think so valuable. And I really hope that as many people as possible are able to watch this, because this is truly like being able to listen in on a conversation like this, I think is truly powerful.
It's, I hope so. And I only say that because obviously I'm not listening in, but I will tell you that being part of a conversation like this is so important. So I would also encourage people to engage in this conversation with other people who are open to it.
To maybe
because
use this conversation as a catalyst to have conversations like this with other people. Thank you.
Yeah, because it has been at least as inspiring for me. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah. It's always so good to see you.
Oh, it's so great to be with you. I can't wait to be with you in person someday soon.
So just as a reminder for everybody who's watching, we'll have links for Michelle's website and YouTube channel below here. And then also, of course, for those of you who don't know me, there will be links for my website and my YouTube channel below as well, and social media and stuff. So feel free to check both of us out. And thanks so much for watching.